Okay, we are starting Unit 5.4, which is a pretty short chapter that discusses location. It has a lot of really important terms, and really, while it's short, it is, again, one of those chapters that we want to know and be able to analyze to the AO3 level. So, the objectives for this, we will look at location decisions for the production for a business. Why do businesses pick specific locations? And then the AO3 is discuss the ways of reorganizing your production as a business, both nationally and internationally. So today for the lesson, we are really going to look at the terms of outsourcing, offshoring, insourcing, and reshoring. We're going to discuss some positives and negatives of those, but we will not exhaust all of them just because I want to do that when we are in class, thinking through some of these scenarios, but we will look at some of those today as well. All right, so there are many factors that impact the location decision for a business. I'm sure you could come up with a lot as we start to think about that or brainstorm. So we'll just go through some, and these are not all of them. These are just some factors that impact it. Think of cost. Think of how expensive it is to be in certain places. Think of the cost to be um, the cost in terms of the type of business that you are as well. Like if you need a lot of land or space versus if you're a restaurant where you need to be somewhere local. So think of your land, think of your labor, think of shipping, think of how far away you might be in terms of getting your products to and from places. If depending on what type of business again you are, your suppliers, you may want to be close to them. Competition. Some businesses actually go close to competition for areas that like foot traffic potentially, such as retailers or potentially like car dealerships we see. So you might be close to competition, or you might want to be in a place where there's not a lot of competition because it's an untapped market. Geography. This helps with a lot of things such as raw materials, looking again at supplier networks, getting goods in and out of certain locations. So geography in general. Looking at your market and demographics. And again, this is a good one when you think about selling to your customers. Do you want to be close to that demographic, to that market, or do you not need to be close to it? And I guess that will determine again if you are going to be close to it or if not, somewhere cheaper, possibly. Intuition and familiarity. I know at this point in my life, I feel very comfortable with parts of Central Ohio, and then there are a lot of parts of Central Ohio I don't feel comfortable with. So some people will truly make that location decision on where they are comfortable. The labor pool. What is the labor pool for what you need? Does it support your business? That will be a really important factor for location if you have employees. The infrastructure. Infrastructure looks at the utilities, the roads, the technology that enables business to happen. So thinking about the road, uh, again, in and out, being able to get to certain places on time, making sure that the utilities support what you need, that there's a technological infrastructure. We talked about proximity to suppliers, government policy. Government policy will determine, certain location decisions. If we can get certain subsidies or if we can get tax incentives, potentially that may choose a business to go to a certain location as well. Our aims and objectives. Again, the type of business we really are will depend on our location and how important it is to be in a busier area versus a more remote area that's less expensive. And so really will depend on what our business's aims and objectives are and what type of business we are. Let me go back here for a second. When I say what type of business, a secondary sector manufacturing company is going to need a lot of land. It's going to need to be out away from typically expensive city areas. You think of a plumber. A plumber doesn't necessarily need to be in the middle of a city. They can actually travel. They're going to want more search optimization. So when people are looking for plumbers, that they pop up that top of that Google search versus a restaurant or a retailer where people actually go to them. So making sure that they're able to be around where people can get to them easily, park, walk, depending on again the business. Here are some terms that are super important. These are the AO3s. So the first two are going to be outsourcing versus offshoring. Outsourcing, another term for outsourcing is subcontracting. Subcontracting and outsourcing are used synonymously. So please make sure you understand that they are used synonymously. The concept of outsourcing is your business is going to subcontract work to a third party business to complete some or all of the work. Basically, you're subcontracting the work to another business. It becomes offshoring when that business that you subcontract the work to is out of your home country. So for instance, we can outsource significantly locally. So for instance, if you're a daycare, you may choose to outsource the janitorial services. You may not choose to do that on your own, but you may want to outsource it to a company that cleans, overnight when you're not there. That is outsourcing. If I am subcontracting again work to another country, then that's when it becomes offshoring. But you can use the word outsourcing for offshoring situations because offshoring is outsourcing, but not all outsourcing is potentially offshoring. So it just depends if it's in your home country or not. They have many of the same benefits and disadvantages, which we'll talk about in a moment. Insourcing. Insourcing is the opposite of outsourcing. Basically, insourcing is a fancy word for completing your work in-house, internally within your business. A business has the opportunity to choose to do things themselves, or they have the opportunity to outsource it to another business. When we look at Upper Arlington High School or Upper Arlington schools in general, we in-source our custodial services. This is something a lot of businesses will choose to outsource, as mentioned in my daycare example earlier. But we in-source, that means we do it. We don't have another company doing this for us. So if you're doing something within your business, it's insourcing. If you're subcontracting it out to a third-party business or another business, it's outsourcing. Finally, reshoring. Reshoring is the opposite of offshoring, in which I, as a business, choose to bring back offshored work to the home country. There is a common misconception with this one, so please understand. Typically, businesses that do choose to reshore to bring the offshored work back to the home country are not insourcing during the process. During the process, they are typically outsourcing to a third party. That third party just happens to be in their home country. Okay, so pause there for a second. Offshoring and reshoring are opposite. Outsourcing and insourcing are opposite. They are very important terms. They need to be analyzed to the AO3 level. So how do you analyze that to the AO3 level? We look at positives and negatives of each. We're able to understand how different stakeholder groups are impacted by the use of any of these really for the company. So thinking about that, being able to come up with good judgments if it is good for a business to do a certain type of outsourcing, offshoring, insourcing, or reshoring. Using that as a strategy, coming up to a judgment and conclusion, and then again our typical limitations of our typical AO3s where we will talk about what we don't know. So overall, outsourcing and offshoring have many benefits in the fact that they allow the business to focus on their core competencies. So a business has core competencies, things that give them a unique selling point, give them an advantage. Typically, the rule of thumb is if there are other businesses that can do things better than you can or for less money, so you can focus on your core competencies, you typically choose to outsource that work. And so really looking at how we do things versus how somebody else could do it, will the quality be different? And then also our cost savings. Typically, outsourcing or offshoring tends to be cheaper because you're outsourcing to that third party. That third party is paying their rent. That third party is paying for their equipment. They're hiring their workers. That has nothing to do with the business. That's the third party's business. They're training their workers. And so because those costs are absorbed by the third party or the outsourced business, your business isn't paying for that directly. Additionally, because that business typically will be producing at a larger scale, they benefit from economies of scale because they are more than likely having more customers and they are doing a lot of the same thing. And so because of that economies of scale, then they can hopefully pass those cost savings on to you. When you get to an offshoring situation, you start to see the labor, you start to see the cost, the external economies of scale that are out there that will really reduce costs, and maybe those steeple factors, especially that will minimize costs, such as different wages in different countries, land, things like that. And so that is probably, or those are probably the biggest advantages. There are many more, and we'll talk through more in person. Disadvantage wise with outsourcing and offshoring, there's a level of control lost. Businesses will lose the control when they allow somebody to do something for them. And so because of that, that loss of control could impact the image of the business itself. They don't really have that direct control over that third party business. Additionally, there are going to be shipping costs. There are going to be different ways that carbon footprint, think about getting things to where you want to sell to your market. And that will be different based on how far away you're outsourcing versus offshoring your products. When you insource, you have that control. It's that opposite. You gain that control back by doing something. But you have to determine, do I have the core competencies to do this? Is my business going to have the ability to have the quality of creating this good or service to my ability or to the best of my ability that's going to be uh, best for my company? Or should my time be spent on other core competencies? Reshoring has become popular in the last several years due to a lot of externalities, typically government policy, where you will hear politicians wanting to bring manufacturing, especially back to the United States, bringing it back to US soil. This allows for the business to outsource to companies that are in their home country, which helps with language barriers and helps with the distance that products need to be to travel to get back to the home country. However, it tends to be more expensive in a lot of cases, which might bring up the price of your products if you are bringing things back to the home country. Those are just several positives and negatives. This shows you, and I was trying to find the most up-to-date stuff, and you'll see in the next one, it's not necessarily up to date, but it will helpfully uh, show you what I point about this. Average monthly manufacturing wages by country are shown on this chart. So if you want to pause it and take a look at it, and you will see what I'm talking about the cost savings typically in offshoring situations from a country like the United States to a country like possibly China or India. This one is the best I could find to show what I was trying to show. We're looking in 2011 US dollars with this. So we're looking at a base year when we do this. This is looking at the average wage in the US and the average wage of China. And you will see when you look at that the average wage of the US is higher than the average wage of China throughout the whole model. However, you will see that the average wage in the US has stayed more steady while the wages are growing faster in China in this scenario. And that is something that we're still continuing to see. And so some businesses are looking at potentially reshoring because they're looking way ahead, because you don't just change these overnight, and saying, well, if the wages in China are growing more rapidly than the wages in the United States, eventually we might find ourselves in a situation where they grow too fast and that it's not benefiting us as much as we thought it would. So that was the concept of this visual. All right, so our objectives again, you need to be able to analyze reasons why a business locates in a certain area. And then you also need to be able to analyze to the AO3 level those four terms: outsourcing, offshoring, insourcing, and reshoring. And again, when we look at paper 3, which is something we're going to start really talking about, you have to discuss strategies that businesses can use. And it's a really big part of your points for your external assessment. And these are strategies potentially that you will be able to use for that answer. So to be able to analyze them really well to that AO3 level is very important. All right, thank you so much.